Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Thais Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast and day 8. Day 8 of the 10 days of worth, which means we have, after this, only 2 episodes left. Whew, and I have these next 3 episodes are good ones, especially tomorrow, day 9 and day 10. I really, really, really love those. So stick around or stay tuned. For the episodes that are coming out tomorrow and then Monday. But today's episode is good too. Today, we are talking about 2 things. We're talking about, are you doing it for likes or are you doing it to make change? Basically, I share my story about realizing how I was doing so much of being an entrepreneur for attention and how it was important for me to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order for me to take up greater space and actually say things that are important in the world. And then the second part of this episode, we talk about shame. Shame is a big one. Shame really keeps us stuck, keeps us lacking movement. It keeps us perpetuating a really painful cycle. And because I talk a lot about emotions, it's very important that I also talk about shame, because shame is one of those feelings that really stop us from doing anything else. So the second part of this episode is all about shame. And then tomorrow, we're going to dive back into worthiness for the next 2 days. We're going to be talking about what we can do, like practical tools to address our worthiness wound and why we tend to mistrust ourselves and all of that good stuff. So just keep tuning in. And if you are new to the series, welcome. You don't have to tune in to previous episodes in order to get the most out of this episode, though. If you want to binge listen to all parts of this series, I, of course, highly recommend it. And of course, all of this is in celebration of the fact that doors are now officially open for my 9th cohort of Worthy Women Rise. Y'all, I've been leading this program for a while now, and every evolution, every iteration gets better and better, more integrated, more full, more packed with tools and experiences that I know are going to lift you into a space of feeling radically worthy, the type of radical worth that allows you to come back to yourself again and again and again and really land within your heart so that you can say what you need to say, you can take up the space you need to take up, so you can be in the intimacy, in love that you want to be. All of that is important for all of that. What I'm trying to say, all of that is grounded in our worthiness. Our worthiness dictates so much of how we're capable and able to operate in the world. And listen, you don't actually have to feel worthy to join this program, right? Like, you don't have to believe in yourself in order to join or believe in your innate worthiness. You know, you don't actually have to have this insight and feel worthy. I'll do that for you. I'll hold that for you. I'll hold the fact that you are an inherently worthy woman for you. So you don't have to do that right now. You just have to decide that you're over the struggle. You're over the struggle of getting in your own way over and over and over again. You're over the struggle of letting your unworthiness dictate the decisions that you make in your life. That your unworthiness dictates the type of love you let in, the type of careers that you pursue, the kind of opportunities that you allow in. Like, you just have to be over that struggle and trust that the process of your own innate worth will unfold for you, and I will do the rest. Okay? Does that sound good? If you're interested in learning about this program, go to worthywomenrise.com. Spots are already being filled up with this spring 2020 cohort. It's going to be a really good cohort, and this is your invitation. So let's get into this episode. The first part, we are going to be talking about being a change maker and what that looks like, and then we're going to talk about shame. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Today, the video topic is, are you doing it for likes or are you doing it for change? And this is something that I've had to face within myself in a really big way this past year. So in 2016, I had a pretty clear idea of how I wanted my 2017 to go. I had been building my business. full-time since June of 2015. And I've been a coach and a part-time entrepreneur since 2011. And I had an idea of how I wanted my business to go. And then it was December of 2016 that some events took place that really radically changed my perspective on life. There was a culmination of events. One being Trump being elected, that I think woke up many, many white women and white appearing women. And so that definitely woke me up. But that wasn't the only thing that was going on. I was also healing my mother wound in a deeper way and finding autonomy and a different type of relationship with my mother that allowed us to have a deeper level of communication and more self-responsibility on my end by acknowledging what is not mine. I think self-responsibility is really important when we can know what is not ours to take self-responsibility of. And I was starting to feel really jaded and frustrated with the coaching industry. I've been in the coaching industry, like I said, since 2011. And I was starting to feel really jaded by some of the tactics and techniques that were being used and the way that these quote unquote, multi-millionaire coaches, how they were making money. And that wasn't really resonating with me. And I wasn't sure what the answer to that was. And I thought I was the only one. And I stumbled upon a community of people who were naming and labeling and understanding how the coaching industry is perpetuating a lot of the same belief systems that got me to feel unworthy and, questioned my value in the world from the beginning. So I was participating and perpetuating the same narrative that was leading me to feel unworthy. And I think we all do this on some level. And the worst part is often very unconscious. So I was buying in to this idea that in order to be a coach, I had to sell my lifestyle. In order to be a coach, I had to appear like I was happy and sunshine and rainbows all the time. I had to appear like I was, living a life that's bigger than my own. And so in December of 2015, that all came to a head for me when I got into this group of people and everyone was talking about these trends and how there's got to be a different way. And as I was exploring what that different way looks like, I also realized my own inherent racist values as a white woman. Just by being white, we have prejudices and we have bigotry against people who aren't white, completely internalized. This is not conscious. And I started to understand what that meant for me. I never thought of myself as a racist person. Like, I have Black friends and I don't see color and everyone's equal and everyone's the same. And, it sucks that we live in a system where, some people are having a harder life because of the color of their skin. But ultimately, we're all, and living in a post-racial society. And that's what I think many of us believe. And that month and the coming year of 2017, I really, really started to understand how that's actually not, any of that is not the case, and how we all carry a tremendous amount of privilege as white people, and we have a responsibility as white people to be understanding what that privilege is. Just like if you're a man, you have a responsibility of seeing how the privilege of being a man gets you access that not being a man wouldn't get you. We all have that responsibility of checking our privilege and having these conversations about how we're upholding white supremacy and patriarchal narratives and cis heteronormativity. So all these words, I didn't know any of this before 2017. And so 2017 was a huge awakening of a different set of values and a different understanding. And I realized, I'm getting to my point here, I realized by awakening to social justice and by awakening to my own privilege and by awakening to my inherent autonomy and worthiness in a deeper way, that I was doing everything for attention. So my business up to that point was, how many likes can I get? Because I had an equivalency with likes and followers with success. And if I had more of that, then I would be considered more successful. I would get more clients. I would make more money. And so everything I had done up to that point, all of my techniques on Instagram and all of my, behind the scenes stuff was built to get as many likes and followers as possible. But I actually wasn't making change. I wasn't actually changing anything, because when we are obsessed with likes and being liked and, being inspirational without actually saying anything, we're inspiring people, but how long are you inspired by? If you see an Instagram post of an awesome quote, like how long does that inspire you? Like an hour, and then what? And so, I really had to sit with, do I just want to be inspirational? Is that the meaning of my life? Like, do I want to die being like, well, at least I got 1 million likes? Like, what am I really doing these likes for? What am I really doing any of this for? What is the whole point of building an online business? Am I just doing this to get attention? And so while I had fundamental good intentions, and of course I create change within the lives of my one-on-one clients, and of course, I deeply believe that my work is life-changing. But beyond that, when we're just talking about what conversations I was having, they weren't really leading to the change that I wanted. And I had to really sit with that. And I've seen now that how comfortable we are with being uncomfortable is a huge indicator of our ultimate ability to engage in real dialogue and conversations that can move the needle, that can create the lasting change. But the only way that we can develop a deeper relationship with being comfortable in uncomfortable is by developing a deeper relationship with our own emotions and our own sense of fragility. And by fragility, I mean our own sense of shame and unlovability. Because while we're directly connecting our worthiness with our lovability, we're not going to risk actual conversations. We're not going to risk jeopardizing people not liking us. And so we're not actually making change. If you think about what it means to be a change maker, it means moving beyond the status quo. It doesn't mean status quo with modifications. It means completely annihilating the current level of reality and seeking something totally different. And in order to be a true change maker, you have to be having real conversations, whatever that looks like for you. Conversations that shake people, conversations that gets pushback, conversations where people are like, I don't agree. And how can we have these intense, necessary conversations if we're constantly terrified of what that will mean about us and our worth? So the question is, are you doing it for likes, or are you doing it for change? Are you committed to something beyond yourself? Are you committed to moving the needle of humanity forward in some radical way? Or are you just wanting to be inspirational? And there's no judgment. I just know what the truth is for me. And the truth is for me, I can be inspirational for a year or two, but like I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not a coach to make 6 figures and be done. I'm not here to build an influencer brand and then that's it. Like my commitment is to humanity. My commitment is to be a change maker. I have a huge vision of the world and I have a huge impact I feel called to make. And I am going to do everything I can internally to make sure that I have the right foundation so that when I receive pushback, when I get into uncomfortable conversations, I know how to handle it without letting it collapse me. And when we're talking about social justice, specifically when we're talking about things like white supremacy and how as white women we're upholding it unless we're not, right? These is uncomfortable conversations. I had a Facebook post that I shared the other day that kind of went like viral, at least viral for me, and it got like, a bajillion likes and like 400 some shares. So I mean, it was shared outside of my community. And the post basically said, white women are racists. And in my community, we get that. But outside of my community, we don't get that. This is a huge concept for many people. And I got a lot of pushback. And luckily, I had developed the resiliency. I had developed a relationship with myself and my worthiness where that pushback didn't mean that I was a bad person. Where that pushback, that feedback, that offering was to me an opportunity for me to soften into my own vulnerability, my own humanity, and to lean into my systems, and to lean into my support, and to lean into my understanding of who I am. And we talked a little bit about this, I think it was 2 days ago. If we're so head heavy that we are closed off to anybody else's opinions being different than our own, then we're no different than our current dictatorial president, right? So we got to look at how am I pushing away real conversations because of my own fears of shame and guilt and being uncomfortable. I wrote the other day, a white woman was talking about privilege. And I wrote in the comment, I was like, if the conversation of privilege brings up guilt and shame, look, guilt and shame are not helpful teachers. Okay. When we feel shame, it's not like we feel inspired to learn, right? When we feel shame, it's an uncomfortable experience. But I said, look, if you're feeling guilt and shame, great. That's just an emotion. Guilt and shame are just an emotion. And I truly believe that this person has the tools to learn how to navigate these emotions. But this is just an emotion, as opposed to not understanding our privilege is actually causing detrimental harm to Black and brown people. So we can handle a little bit of shame. It's not the ideal tool, and shaming doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. But when we feel it, let's do something about it. Let's do something with that uncomfortable experience. Let's actually settle into that space so we can use it for our rise. Uncomfortable emotions is my specialty because I know so much about emotions, and I know that there's a way that we can lean into even the most uncomfortable experiences. And when we do, we develop a type of foundation within ourselves that allows us to truly be the change. So, my love, are you engaging in conversations that matter, or are you doing this for likes? Are you truly committed to being a change maker, or are you just here to be liked? And I can guarantee you that when you really step into being a change maker and having conversations that matter, you're going to get a bigger platform because these conversations are valued, and people value people that know how to engage in these types of conversations. Let's see if I forgot anything. Oh, so, part of creating a new understanding of, okay, I recognize this, Thais. Okay, I'm seeing how maybe I've been doing a lot of this for likes and for, getting clients in through just having these nice conversations. And now I want to engage in something more real. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what to tell you. This is something that we have to find for ourselves. But I'm ready to engage in some more difficult conversations and really get into the trenches. The next step is to begin to really develop a new level of safety within yourself where your worthiness is not attached to external validation. And this is difficult. And, as a highly sensitive person, I'm an empath, and I'm not saying that you're not going to feel anything. If somebody pushes you back, it's not like you're going to be immune to it, but it just won't collapse you. Yeah. And this is a really special space to be, because this is the space of someone who's truly standing in their worth. This is the space of a sovereign woman. This is the space of someone who's decided that they are not going to fucking care anymore about what people have to say, and that they're going to stand in their truth, and they're going to share that truth. And they're also going to be completely flexible, knowing that whatever feedback they receive, it's okay. It's not going to ultimately jeopardize their truth. Truth can be changed, right? But they know that changing that truth, changing that belief system, changing themselves doesn't mean that they were broken and bad to begin with. This is a sovereign woman. And this is the most exciting part, because then we get to actually be open and we get to actually create real change. And I truly, truly, truly believe that we are all capable of making real change. And we all have a desire to make real change. We just fooled ourselves a little bit into what that looks like. If you're interested in deepening your own understanding of yourself, I highly recommend Worthy Women Rise. This is the stuff we're going to get into. How we can develop a new relationship with ourselves so we can be truly radical change makers and step into a form of leadership that can really revolutionize and make the impact that we want to make. Impact beyond just likes. Impact beyond just feeling fuzzy feelings. Impact that lands. Impact that gets you places. Impact that moves that needle forward. Impact that leaves a legacy, a lasting legacy, not just legacy of likes. We're going to be talking about navigating shame and being shamed. I want to talk about this because this comes up a lot when we're talking about uncomfortable things. Now, yesterday I talked about the difference between being liked and being a leader, right? There's a huge difference between amassing influence and inspiration and amassing actual change and being a radical change maker in our country. Or in the world, really. When we talk about creating real change, it requires us to get uncomfortable, and it's ultimately going to lead to the people that we are speaking to push them into getting uncomfortable, because change happens when we get uncomfortable. However, there is a mechanism in place within our hearts called shame that often prevents going from being uncomfortable to change. And so that's what I want to talk to you all about today. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that buffer between change, getting uncomfortable, and I call it the shame buffer, or the shame condom. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Yesterday, I had a podcast interview with a guest who's going to be coming out in a couple weeks. And we were talking about shame, and that's where this idea for this broadcast came from. We were talking about how oftentimes we fall under a spiral of either righteousness, like we're right, or fragility, which is a collapse of our capacity to be with what's presented at us. And the word fragility definitely comes from, in the social justice realm, when we're talking about racism, very often white people have a hard time talking about how they are complicit to white supremacy. And so what happens is they spiral into a sense of fragility. And that fragility is really, it's a spiral of shame. And so it's very easy when we're talking about something like race for white people to go into the spiral of, you're shaming me. I feel shame. Therefore, something is wrong. I can't listen to what you're saying. Clearly, what you're saying is wrong. And I'm out. I'm disconnected. I'm done with this conversation. And we can see how fragility in the social justice conversations can create a lot of pain. It creates a lot of pain within women of color. It creates a lot of pain because we uphold systemic oppression. It's a problem all around. But this isn't just in the social justice community. Experiencing shame and feeling the collapse of not being able to deal with what is coming up within us is something that happens across the board. And it absolutely prevents us from moving forward. So a story, when I was in the throes of my binge eating and I started to get help and I was having sessions with my therapist talking about binge eating, I came to an understanding, a realization that the binging wasn't the problem. Like the consumption of food wasn't the problem. The problem was the shame and the guilt that I experienced immediately afterwards. And what we came to understand was that shame was actually tremendously comfortable. Like I knew how to feel shame in my disgustingness is how I felt. I knew how to feel shame in my fatness is how I felt. I knew how to feel shame in my inadequacy and brokenness because I had just binged on 2 pies of pizza. That I knew very well. Shame is actually something that we know quite well, and we hate it, but we know it. And what I find is that shame is like the condom. It's a condom that prevents us from getting to the meatier, juicier part of the conversation of what's actually coming up, which is this uncomfortable experience is bringing up deeper feelings that we weren't taught to hold. And I talked about uncomfortable emotions on day 9. We talked about emotional shutdown and emotional overwhelm and how highly sensitive people can get very overwhelmed by emotions. And I talked about all of that. But what happens is my binging and then the subsequent shame prevented me from actually feeling the abandonment, the unworthiness, the sense of I don't belong here, the sense of brokenness and despair. And because we're not taught how to feel those emotions, it's very easy for us to then get stuck in the shame and in the shame think that there's something wrong. And for me, it's specifically with binge eating, that something wrong was me. And so I would spiral in self-hate. And then the next day I would deprive myself of food because I'm a bad person and I shouldn't eat because I just consumed 10,000 calories. And so I would starve myself all day for like 2-3 days. And then I would binge again. And that was my life. Now I'm seeing, as I fully healed from binge eating, I see the same desire to shut down and shame happen all around me when we're having uncomfortable conversations about wealth inequality, about racism, about systemic oppressions, about the patriarchy. In men, it's very easy for us to collapse in the sense of I'm bad. And the reason I believe that we do that is because we lack the foundation of an identity of who we are that's not based on these external metrics. You are more than the color of your skin. You're more than the weight of your body. You're more than all of that. But our society has taught us that we are that. And in many ways, identifying with that is liberating. So I'm not taking that away. But I'm just saying, like, when we identify with something, we want to defend it. Our ego steps in. And so then it's very easy for us, when that thing is being attacked, for us to spiral in our shame. But the shame isn't the problem. And so lately, when I've been having conversations about white fragility with women and the conversations of privilege, and they say, I'm feeling shame or I'm feeling like you're shaming me or whatever the conversation is, I often say, great. Shame is something we can deal with. We can deal with navigating shame. We can deal with that uncomfortable emotion. And let's learn what that emotion is telling us. Let's go deeper. What is underneath that layer of shame? What is being pulled to come into your existence that you are denying by believing your shame? Or by believing that the shame means that something bad is happening? Like, let's explore. Let's take it to the deeper level. Let's not just sit in the idea that we're being shamed. And oftentimes, we're actually not being shamed. It's very rare that we're actually being shamed. Being shamed is being flat out called, you are a bad person. How often does that really happen? More often than not, someone is talking about something that triggers something very uncomfortable within us, and our internal mechanism is to experience shame. And again, if we believe the meaning of shame is that there's something wrong or something bad, we're going to push that something away. And what I'm recommending is that we look at shame as an indicator that there's something deeper. There's something inviting our attention. Can you imagine if we were able to have deeper, complex conversations about things like race without collapsing as white people? Or imagine having conversations about patriarchy and a toxic masculinity with men without them collapsing. Can you imagine how liberating that would feel for the oppressed? How the power dynamics would change. But because we're believing that we're being shamed, because we believe that shame is the existence that we're, being shamed, really, we push it away. And that can be really detrimental. It can be detrimental to other people. It can be detrimental to ourselves. So how do we start to navigate shame? Well, we start to understand our emotions. Like we talked about in day 9, we start to understand how emotions are coming up for us. We start to understand the anatomy of emotions. We start to understand and we start to develop a deeper foundation within us that cannot be shamed because it is not tied to anything external to ourselves. When we can develop a foundation of worth, we can be with the shame and we can dig deeper without it shaking our entire experience of being human. So like I was sharing my story about binge eating, right? And how I understood that shame and guilt were the mechanism that was preventing me from actually feeling what was going on. So the minute that I started to understand that, anytime I felt shame and guilt, I was able to say, okay, there's something deeper here. What's that something deeper? And within a matter of, years, lifetimes, my binging started to dissipate. Not lifetimes. But the cooler part isn't that the binge eating dissipated. The cooler part was that I was able to start to heal a deeper part of myself. I was able to go to places that shame had been preventing me to go in. And I think that that's the coolest bit. When we stop making an enemy of ourselves, we get to explore our depths in a deeper, more fulfilling, more compassionate way. And again, I keep saying this, we are taught to make enemies of ourselves. We are taught to see ourselves as the problem. We are taught to believe that we are inadequate and that we are broken. So this is liberatory work. This is revolutionary work. This is owning our shit in a whole different way. Synopsis: navigating shame and being shamed. The whole point is there's nothing bad here. Emotions are a sign that there's something deeper within us inviting our attention. Shame in and of itself is not bad. Okay? So if you feel shamed, breathe, and ask yourself, why am I feeling uncomfortable around this? What is the grain of truth here? Before you react, before you lash, before you shut down because you feel like shame isn't a good learning mechanism. Of course, shame isn't a good learning mechanism. It's debilitating. Of course, we shouldn't shame other people because it debilitates them. However, it is a human condition. People are going to feel it. You are going to feel it. Whether people are trying to shame you or not, you are going to experience shame. So you may as well fucking learn how to do something about it so it doesn't collapse you. And in fact, it deepens your ability to be with yourself and be a human and not collapse and be strong and be resilient so you can be the change maker that you want to make, like we talked about yesterday. If you're going to be a change maker, truly rise up in your change making skills. This is a conversation I have with myself daily. You're going to have to get uncomfortable and you're going to make other people uncomfortable. And when other people are uncomfortable, things come up. Awesome. If you experience shame, sit with it and then ask yourself, what's the deeper truth here?
Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.